Oh, well, now to discuss more on the topic, we're now joined on the broadcast by Scott Lucas, professor of the international politics at Clinton Institute University College in Dublin. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Now, when it comes to, of course, Trump has now denied and backed out, saying, well, he will not, there's no plans, considering the fact that Iran listened to Trump and did not execute 800 people, although 3,000 people already killed. But when it comes to military actions, there were many reports. Arab allies, as I just mentioned, convinced Trump or Israel did because they are not ready. Trump said that he did it on his own volition. Although U.S. has now deployed, according to reports, USS Abraham Lincoln carrier. What could be next on Trump's mind now?
Well, I mean, Trump's mind is unpredictable, to say the least. So having threatened these strikes on Iran, the Iranians, either directly or through others, got a message across to Trump that said, "Oh no, we're not going to kill anybody else. We're not going to execute anybody else." And despite the fact that conservatively, at least 3,000 protesters have been killed by Iranian security forces, and many more were threatened with the death penalty, Trump said, "Oh, okay, that's good enough for me. You're not going to kill anybody else." And he made up this story that Iran had 800 people that they were about to hang, and they suspended that, which is completely untrue. So, you know, in terms of Trump's mind, it's like he marched his troops up the hill and then he's marched them back down again. But I think you have to ask what the administration is going to do next. Are there others in the administration that still want to put further pressure on Iran, including the prospect of military action? I don't think that's the case. I think because of two factors. I think the first is that the people within probably the Pentagon, people in other agencies realized it's one thing to threaten military strikes on Iran, it's another to carry them out, that it could cause a great deal of instability and not work. And secondly, I think the most important thing is that the Gulf states and Israel and Turkey all told the Americans, don't do this, that you're not going to do anyone any good, including Iran's protesters, by carrying out military strikes.
Right. And when you talk about the unpredictability, we have, of course, seen his first statements coming about, regime change. Do you think he will go for regime change? And if yes, what is the alternative that U.S. have to replace the regime in Iran as of now?
No, I don't think he'll go for regime change because, frankly, it's too difficult. The fact here is that despite all the myths about the U.S. and Israel being behind these protests, so on, they weren't. These were Iranians around on the ground who wanted political, economic, social reforms, and possibly a change of the regime. This wasn't the U.S. directing them. So the U.S. really doesn't really have leverage right now that the protests have been suppressed. And secondly, I think Trump is distracted. Trump is now going to look at something shiny elsewhere. So last night, the news wasn't Iran. It was his latest threats to try to seize Greenland from Denmark and from America's European allies.
Right. And you also earlier mentioned, what the Trump administration wants in Pentagon. We have had this one comment come from U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, who just did slam the Arab nations, saying that they're not very good allies of U.S. If they had stopped the calls or the move for attacks. How do you analyze that then?
Well, I think there's a split amongst Republicans. You've got Republicans like Lindsey Graham who very much want to see that regime change in Iran. They've wanted that for years. They're now frustrated that that's not imminent. You've got other Republicans who are very much against the U.S. using military action, and they let that be known to Trump. So you've got, far from this idea of a unified group behind Trump, whichever way he decides to go, I think you've got a Republican Party that's in a bit of disarray over this.
Right. And now also I would like for you to help us understand the situation in Iran right now. Do you really think that the descent has now indeed been stopped there? According to reports, of course, visuals we do see that there are no demonstrations going on. Over 3,000 people have been killed. Do you observe the descent to have been indeed stopped by the government?
No, I'm fortunate to have many friends inside Iran. I worked there before the crackdown in 2009 by the regime, and I'm still in touch with people. And I would say that for now, they have brutally suffered. For now, they're having to mourn the fact that, in the words of one of my friends, everyone here knows someone who has been killed. They are going to have to regroup economically, they're going to have to put up with what is a very horrible situation just to get by day to day. But I would say, despite the fact that the regime again has suppressed the protest, as they have in 2009, 2017, 2019, 2022, that my Iranian friends talk about fire underneath the ashes. That even if you crack down on these protests and if you quell them for now, that the causes of the protest remain. And yes, people will come back and call for their rights, call for justice, and call for decency in the future.
All right, of course, we'll be looking forward to any update we get that from that region. But thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and giving your analysis.
Thank you.